"Are you done with your sermon?" asks the sweet child, waiting for a flustered rabbi/dad to be done at his computer. "Well, right now it's a blank page," responds the dad. "What's your sermon about?" asks the child. First answer is, "I don't know." Second answer is helping people and how we decide who it is we are going to help. "Who, sweet child, would you help first?" "That's easy," she says. "My sister." It's a good answer. At least when you are 5. I will get back to that. I realize that there are some in this room who are a bit older than that, and some that know a lot more people and a lot about a lot more people than we do when we are children. Okay, here's the part where I talk about diarrhea. Now you're curious where this is going, right? It is unpleasant, but it can also be deadly. When left untreated, it leads to dehydration, which leads to severe dehydration, which leads to death. And by the time I am done with this sermon, and it is not a long one, by the time I am done, 8 children in Africa are going to die this very way. And if you do that math, that comes to over 400,000 children a year, every year. To make matters worse, and yes, they can be worse, diarrhea is not a particularly hard malady to treat. ORS, oral rehydration salt, and that is exactly what it sounds like. Ideally with some added zinc to it, that's all it takes. UNICEF estimates that a course of treatment with these salts costs approximately 37 cents. Our tradition teaches that a single life is equivalent to an entire universe, and in our world, it's worth less than 37 cents. And yes, I realize it's not nearly that simple. 37 cents, yes, but also supply chains, international cooperation, clinics, and on and on. But still, for a world that has figured out how to get a pair of socks to your door 2 hours after you click the buy button on your phone, we could figure that out if we wanted. Our Torah portion teaches us the world is full of blessings and curses. That is how this week's Torah portion opens. And ignorance can be more of a blessing than I think most of us realize. And back when the rabbis were calculating the value, the pricelessness of a human life, if whatever was happening in the world wasn't happening within, say, 50 miles of wherever they were, well, it wasn't happening, at least not to them. Earthquakes, tsunamis, plagues, wars, if they weren't happening to you, they simply weren't happening. You didn't know the existence of other continents, let alone what was happening on them. There was no way to know a life could be saved for a few shekels, and even if there was nothing you could have done about it back then. Not knowing any of this is a blessing. At least it feels that way to me. And it's why it was possible for whoever authored this week's Torah portion to say, "There will be no needy among you." If your entire world is a few hundred, maybe a few thousand people, it's probably doable. When your entire known world is the entire known world, like for us, it seems impossible. If we can't even figure out salt tablets, how on earth can we ever imagine we will deal with the hard stuff, the more difficult diseases, oppressive dictatorships, genocides, on and on? Perhaps it's some comfort to know that the Torah knows this too. Just a few verses after we are assured that there will never be a needy among us, we're told what to do if and when there are needy among us. And the Torah tells us, do not harden our hearts. The commentators square this circle, there never will be and there always will be, by saying if we follow the laws of the Torah, that first one will be true, and if not, it's going to be the second. There's more need in the world than any of us can ever hope to combat. Using the salt pill example, you could devote your entire life to increasing access, improving access to clean drinking water, and creating more and more composting toilets so that sanitation is possible. And if you did that your entire life, and if you were extraordinarily lucky, you might get that number down from 8 children every 10 minutes to 7.9. but even that is incredibly unlikely. So what are we supposed to do? It is easy to succumb to what people have begun to call compassion fatigue. That is when you just do not have room in your heart to read the news alert about yet another devastating earthquake or an ongoing genocide or a newly extinct species. Abarbanel, another commentator, has a suggestion. Opening your hand, opening your wallet, opening your heart, that grows your empathy. It's not something you have a finite supply of that you must ration and hold on to carefully, but rather your heart, the empathy muscle, it is a muscle that you can strengthen the more you work out on it. And again, even in their small world, the commentators still saw more need than there were resources to go around. And that's why another commentator, Rashi, teaches how you're supposed to make those decisions when more people need help than you are able to help. The Torah portion mentions several groups of people when it talks about the needy among you. It says your family and your neighbors, and also the utterly, incomprehensibly, desperately poor. And Rashi, following the order listed in the verse, says it's the desperately poor that you help first, even before your own family. He also gleans from these verses that our obligation is to those in need in our town over those who are in need in other towns. And while he doesn't offer a rationale, it seems logical enough. If every town looked after itself and its own, we would get to that first verse where there are no needy. And this approach would support us supporting organizations like iHelp. iHelp, where we host a group of unhoused men and food insecure men once a month, and a group of women every fifth Monday of the month when we have those. And it supports those local in our community, even if it's not as efficient, and I don't know what other word to use, than sending salt pills to the other side of the world. And there's a certain irony about how I first became aware of this seeming contradiction between these two commandments, or these two observations in the Torah: there will always and there will never be needy. And it was at a session sponsored by AJWS, American Jewish World Service. For those that don't know, AJWS is a nonprofit guided by Jewish values that funds nonprofits and NGOs across what we call the Global South, previously known as the Third World. And if they have ever once in their decades-long history helped a person who was Jewish, it was purely coincidental. So why would they focus on this verse, on a verse that emphasizes sticking to your local community, to those closest to you? And partly it was to help us develop our own philosophy of tzedakah, our own practice in righteous giving, by forcing us to decide how we will spend our limited resources. When we don't have enough to help everyone, how do we choose who we are going to help? But still, going off Rashi's emphasis on geographical proximity as the guiding factor, that seems like a great case for AJWS not existing at all. Interesting they would choose this text to study. And it was Ruth Messenger, the president of AJWS at the time, who squared that circle. She acknowledged that AJWS often gets criticized in the Jewish community, and it's almost always because of this. Why, people ask, care about any of these global issues when there are so many Jewish people around the world and in our own communities who need our help? In that line of questioning, that would be prioritizing our own clan, those closest to us, over other groups. Nothing wrong, nothing good about that. It is a choice, and simply that. And her response was to say, absolutely. And we do have an obligation. We do have a responsibility to help others in our own communities, those who are Jewish, even if they are around the world, and those who are not Jewish, if they are our neighbors. And if we don't, who will? But, she went on to say, that is a completely false choice. You don't have to pick one cause. While it is for many, AJWS is their primary cause. They raised $46 million in the last year, 2025. AJWS does not have to be the only recipient of a person's tzedakah. Messenger, in fact, argued it shouldn't be. Certainly, there are other causes for those closer to us. It shouldn't be our only obligation, but it should be some. That was her point. As Jews, we do have an obligation to think about those salt pills, even if there is no demonstrable impact on our lives if almost 500,000 children in Africa do or do not die every year. We don't have to care about that. But as Jews, actually we do. Trying to make the world more just is a monumental task. Perhaps it's some consolation to know it was the same in the Torah's time too. This is not a new problem or a new challenge. To quote another oft-used piece of our tradition from Pirkei Avot, it is not our obligation to complete the task, and yet still, that does not excuse us from trying. Ken Yehi Ratzon, may it be God's will, may it be ours. Shabbat Shalom.